Thank you so much, Peter, and hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me along today. I really don't have a lot of time, so if I am going too quick, please just don't hesitate to let me know. But today I'm here to talk to you about what we can do to support people who are affected by trauma. And firstly, I would like to start off by telling you a little bit about the organisation that I work at. So Resilience Learning Partnership are an education and training provider with a dual purpose. We work across health, social care, education, housing and criminal justice. We inform policy and strategy through our work, so we don't just do education and training services, but we're very privileged to be able to support organisations through changing their policy and implementing those policy changes as well. We're a lived experience led organisation, that's what they call us, and around 95% of my workforce have lived experience of psychological trauma, as well as a whole load of other professional experience and qualifications. Our vision as an organisation is quite simple. It's that people with lived experience are valued and that they're thriving, that they're supported by authentic and meaningful relationships within safe and nurturing environments, and they're at the heart of public policy, decision making and service design. And the mission, so how we will see that vision through is for us, it's about creating space for people with lived experience to be heard, valued and supported, enabling them to discover their own potential and realise their own ambitions. Trauma can take an awful lot away from people, and we're all about restoring that. And it may look different depending on every individual person that comes through our door. It's not about our agenda, it's about what people want to regain back themselves. And as a lived experience led organisation, as I said, we influence positive changes across not just organisations, but hopefully now across Scotland, enabling services to better engage and support people with lived experience. That's what our work is all about. As Sandra highlighted, there can be a real lack of engagement and the services that we need, health services, education services, the simple services that might be in our children's lives as well. It's very difficult often for people with lived experience of complex trauma, and some things need to change and adapt so that we can start to seem like a much more less frightening place for some of those individuals, and that sits very much in trauma-informed practice. For us, our priority and commitment areas are about realising aspirations, building social capital for people and influencing that all-important change. And you can learn more about us and that strategic side from our strategic plan. You can find that very easy online. And also we are co-authors of the National Trauma Training Plan and work very closely with Scottish Government as well as NES and IS and other partners and stakeholders and the continued implementation of trauma-informed practice across Scotland. So I'm not here today to talk about the organisation that I work at. I've given you that kind of high level idea of what we do. Instead of telling you about what we do, I want to show you what we do. So I'm going to take you into a bit of a live piece of work that I've actually specifically redesigned for today. Normally we would all be in a room together, we'd have paper out on the table and cups of tea and cakes and we'd get right into this, but we can't do that today. So I'm going to talk through this activity and I hope it still lands as well as it's supposed to. So we're going to look at one case study activity and consider each of the factors as we move through it. I will then present and consider some questions, and then I will present some conclusions to the exercise. Please feel free though to jot things down, make notes or contribute in the chat if you want. So this is case study A. This is Shannon, and I want you to think of Shannon as about 19 years old, the last age we see there on the bullet point list, and I'm literally just going to read through that list. So Shannon, both of Shannon's primary caregivers are alcoholics. She's lived in various women's aid refuges as a child. She's witnessed extreme amounts of violence as a young person and as a child, and was taken into care at age 13 due to mainly being at risk of CSE, which is childhood sexual exploitation. She leaves school at age 14 with no qualifications and has multiple convictions by age 19. She experiences homelessness as a child, as a teenager, and as an adult, and as a teenage pregnancy, age 19. And also her first serious relationship is domestically violent. So normally I would give you guys those questions to go away and consider yourself, but I'm just going to kind of read through them and talk through some of the general responses we get when we do this in a workshop environment like this. So first question we always ask is, what might the impact of trauma be on Shannon? And Sandra touched on so much of that there. So we often get responses back like poor physical health, poor mental health, high-risk coping strategies, difficulty trusting professionals and forming relationships. Sandra really touched on that in her presentation. We also ask what might be missing from Shannon's life due to the trauma that she's experienced. So healthy relationships might be a common answer we get back. Connection, trust in services and professionals again. Nurture might be very much missing from Shannon's life. People will often say people who understand the impact of trauma may be missing from Shannon's life. Often those people might sit in the services that Shannon might be accessing. Number 3 question is, well, for today, actually, I adapted it slightly. What might a trauma-informed response look like for Shannon? So when we ask this kind of question in a general sense in workshops, we get back like recognition and of the trauma and the impact that it's had on Shannon, us generally recognising that in children, young people and adults. Understanding trauma in schooling, within education, within our curriculum design. Trauma-informed support for parents is something that's more commonly coming through, us beginning to understand the impact of trauma on parenting, for example, and the tensions that might create with child protection. Ending sibling separation, we're safe to do so. Scotland's made some really great step forwards in doing that through the promise. Less young people in care, another step forward that we're very much taking in Scotland. And as I said previously, a real understanding within services and child protection, the impact of trauma on parenting. And when we do the case study activity, the last question that we always ask is, what does the future look like for Shannon? And we get so many different answers back. And over the past 4 years that I've been doing this, it very much has evolved, and it tells us a lot about where people are at on their journey and becoming trauma-informed. The biggest part for me of becoming trauma-informed is about understanding the impact of trauma. Just by doing that, it helps us understand so much more of the world and what's going on in it. But we do get a lot of negative stuff back often about Shannon, which is she might be in prison, she might be dead, our own child might be in care, the cycle of abuse and addiction continues. And where that was done in the early days, it was most commonly only negative responses we would get back. Now those responses are becoming more and more positive, or really full with lots of sentences about what people might be able to do, the different approaches people might be able to take, the understanding that's required perhaps when working with someone like Shannon. So those answers are very much evolving. And we still now are getting a few wee positive ones in, which is absolutely brilliant, which always makes it so much better when I do this part of the case study and let everyone taking part know that actually Shannon is my case study. So the future is me for Shannon. I am Shannon's future. And this is how we do what we do at RLP. We take people's lived experience and we blend it with our professional and academic experience and use it in spaces like this. So it's only myself and 2 other people at RLP who currently openly share our lived experience in this way, and then everyone else who works with us feeds into the wider work that we do. But helps people understand that, you know, somebody like Shannon isn't just a case study plucked out of the air, although I'm sure when you've worked with case studies before, they often are plucked out of the air or they're highly anonymised and we don't ever see the person behind them, and that's absolutely fine and right a lot of the time. But actually it's really good to remember that there are many Shannons out there, and that Shannon is very much actually a real person. This is a real person's story, and it's my story. So I hope you were all pleasantly surprised by that and not too shocked, but I want to go back to the rest of the questions and answer them in a bit of a different order. So what might the impact of trauma be on Shannon? The list that I gave before and that people often respond back with pretty much was all of the above I had as a young person and as a young adult. Poor physical health, particularly around things like dentistry, and not engaging in things like smear appointments because life was really chaotic. And forming relationships with professionals was very difficult for me as someone who left school very, very young because I was so disruptive. And such a troublemaker for the school. It was much easier just to get me out of that environment. So, and when I went into care as well, they tried to force me back into a secure school, and that just further compounded how unwilling and unready I was to be able to sit in a classroom and learn and concentrate and get on with my peers and the professionals who taught us. What might be missing from Shannon's life due to the trauma that she's experienced. So for me, I was very misunderstood as a young people. I don't think people around me very much understood the impact of trauma, and I was labelled that bad, disruptive kid that, you know, won't listen, won't do what they're told. But I'd experienced a hell of a lot of trauma. This bullet point list that you have is just a wee snippet. It's what's safe for me to share with you all today, but I'm sure you can all put two and two together and read between the lines of what that really would have meant for me, and how much trauma myself and actually my brother would have been experiencing on a daily basis. So being really misunderstood and labelled, we still do that with kids, and it's a lack of understanding of trauma that makes us do that. I was very isolated as a young person. I got more and more further and further away from my support systems, from my family, even though it was chaotic and traumatic. It was my chaos and my trauma, and being ripped away from that and put in an isolated place in care was really not the answer. More support from my mother to leave her abusive partner and to get a grip on her addiction would have been so much better. Getting out of the women's aid system and into secure housing earlier would have been much better. My mum being able to get out and get a job and do something with her life would have been much better than just ripping me out of the family home, because that's where I went right back to in the end up anyway, and where so many of our kids do go back. Opportunities to stay engaged in education were very lacking at my time of life. I know that has significantly changed. I'm a teacher myself now, and I know that it is different. Schools are notified straight away when a young person goes into care, and some supports are put in place, but we're also very quick to remove young people from their school environment without fully understanding what we need to do to actually keep them in there, or looking at alternatives like a break from education. You can't really do that in the UK without being at a real disadvantage, and it'd been nice to see more of that kind of approach being introduced. I had no social capital, which is funny that I ended up going and starting an organisation where one of our core priority and commitments is creating social capital, because that was something I was really lacking as a young person. And I was really lacking in an ability to engage within services as well. And what might a trauma-informed response have looked like to Shannon? Well, only now is my trauma recognised as an adult through being able to engage in trauma-informed services and therapy, and we need to recognise it much earlier in our young people to save them a long time and continuously been going around the system. I'm sure you all know the stats around young care experienced people, for example, and the prison population. 67% of Pullman young people have previously been in care, and that's a kind of a damning reflection on what happens to our young people when they exit the care system. Being able to access the services that we should. So health is a big one for people. Dentistry, cervical screening have been talked about today, but just the ability to go to your GP and frankly talk about what may have happened in your past or what may be going on excuse me, for you just now, is very, very difficult. Sometimes it can be just so much easier to just go, I won't deal with that. I don't want to go and see that really rude person in the in the GP's office who thinks I'm just another number. It's just really easy to ignore and forget. And I don't know if anyone here has seen the Opening Doors video or if that's planned for future, but that highlights really beautiful the difference that just those initial interactions through understanding trauma better and having an awareness of what trauma-informed practice is does for our staff who actually don't work directly with people with lived experience of trauma. And lastly, I just want to finish on, because I know my time is up, the most transformational thing for me, and the thing I often say, and I know some psychologists won't like it, is education healed me way more than trauma therapy ever has, and I think ever will. Education gave me back so many of the things that I didn't even get a chance to get. I will never be poor again. I will never be homeless again. I will always be able to get a job. I feel empowered. I feel knowledgeable. I don't feel worthless. I don't feel stupid anymore. And education did that for me. It was like getting a chance to go back to school as an adult, going to uni at age 29 and staying on for 6 years and getting myself 2 degrees and realising a lot of the things that I thought and was told when I was a young person simply weren't true. I was just very healthily reacting to the trauma that I'd been experiencing. And education can be transformational for people with lived experience of trauma. So I will leave it there. I would love to answer any questions later on in the session or talk to anybody after the session as well. So please take a screenshot of our contact details and feel free to get in touch at any time. Thanks so much for listening, and I'm sorry if it was a bit of a sprint.